Welcome back. You're still watching the Daily Debate, and I'm honored to be having with me over the program for tonight in the studio Dr. Ahmed Leithy, Nassef, the writer and the International Strategic Consultant Management Consultant. Thank you very much once again for being with us tonight. We were focusing solely on the role of Egypt in terms of alleviating the suffering on the shoulders of the Palestinian citizens in the Gaza Strip. We have seen tremendous efforts exerted by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, by the political leadership, by the government under Dr. Mustafa Madbouli, and of course Foreign Minister Dr. Badr Abdel Ati for the past 2 or 3 years to be first reaching a ceasefire and then implementing the different phases of the ceasefire. In your opinion, how do you think that Egypt has managed to be balancing delicately between the humanitarian level of helping the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip and the security importance of maintaining a ceasefire, of course, between the Israeli occupation forces and the innocent Palestinians in the Gaza Strip?
Well, it all started actually before even the military action, when there was a very aggressive efforts from the Israeli side to migrate the Palestinians, whether to Jordan or to Sinai in Egypt. And President Sisi stood very firm, and despite that, at that period of time, President Trump was saying, I'm sure that Egypt and Jordan will accept the Palestinians, and he stood very firm on that position and said this will be a total unfairness, and Egypt will not support such unfairness to take place on my watch, which I think was a very clear message to the American administration that Egypt will not allow this to happen. Then, of course, we've seen the very aggressive war and the atrocities that was committed by the Israelis against the Palestinians in revenge of the 7th of October events. Not defending the 7th of October, which was a totally uncalculated operation, and the risk and the price of such an operation was totally, how would you say, uneven, but also they never calculated it. So they took a totally non-calculated risk, and what they ended up is, okay, fine, they took a few hostages, they killed a few people in Israel.
By Hamas.
By Hamas, of course.
Yes.
And against this, 70,000 at least Palestinians were killed.
Civilians.
Totally civilians, and I think a very large part of them are children and women. Totally, actually, I think they gave, in another way to say, they gave the excuse to the Israeli regime, which is a very extremist right-sided regime, to take such action. And we saw at the period of time that many countries, including the US, including European countries, came up and said that the Israelis have the right to defend themselves. Egypt played a huge role to actually be able to shift that position and explain what really happened. Gaza was totally destroyed. All the humanitarian facilities, be it hospital, be it schools, be it streets, be it even housing, everything was destroyed. And it became an unlivable place. And then, if we all remember, we saw the AI, and this is going to be a Riviera and what have you, and it's going to be a touristic project and that sort of thing. So Egypt has managed to, for the expression, to dance on a very high wire between Hamas, which are just, you know, have almost zero technical or political assessment of the situation, Israel, which is enraged, and they want to use this as a pretext to wipe Gaza and all the Palestinians off the plan. And Egypt has managed with a great deal of difficulty to change the position of so many different European countries and the US, which got to them to accept the peace meeting that took place in Sharm el-Sheikh with President Trump and President Sisi, and to sign the ceasefire and the stoppage of the atrocities that were happening there. So I think Egypt really played the key pivotal role in stopping the bloodshed that was happening. And now we're seeing it through, and we're trying to follow up to get to the second level, because the situation, despite that Egypt is helping a lot, but the current situation is really not sustainable. These people need to go back and have a life, have hospitals, have schools, have almost as close to a normal life as it can be given the circumstances. So Egypt is really following this through to happen, because no matter how much we can help them, this is cannot last forever. So we have to re-innovate or help re-innovate and reconstruct Gaza and to make it a livable place once more.
Doctor, you mentioned the Gaza ceasefire plan that was signed here in Egypt in Sharm el-Sheikh in November of 2025 under the chairmanship of both presidents, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and the US President Donald Trump. During such an event, we have seen statements by the American president stating that President al-Sisi is a great general, he's a great leader for Egypt and a great friend for President Trump as well. How do you see the bilateral relations between Egypt and the United States under the tenures of both presidents, and the importance of this relationship? Because we have seen other statements by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi stating recently that the US president is the only man who is capable of ending the war against Iran and stopping the chaos in the region. And quite obviously, maybe a week or two later, there was a truce, there was a ceasefire for 2 weeks, and quite possibly negotiating a permanent ceasefire between the United States and Iran and Israel. How do you see the strategic importance of this bilateral relationship between Egypt and the United States in terms of mediating those conflicts in the region?
It is the number one, it has the number one importance or priority within the Egyptian relationship, because if we look at the rest of the world, or the key powers even in the world, we see China is only about economy and business and production. Europe is watching but doesn't really interfere because they have their own challenges. Russia is very much engaged in its war against Ukraine. So the only free power or global power is the US. The US, whether we like it or not, is the strongest military on earth, and it is the largest economy in the world. And on top of that, it has a major influence on Israel. So it is very true, the statement of President Sisi, the two statements actually. He made one about them being able to or that the peace treaty that was signed for Gaza wouldn't have happened without the interference of President Trump. And when he made his appeal, I think about 10 days or 2 weeks ago, to President Trump again to stop the war in the region. President Sisi understands perfectly the international landscape, and he understands where the levers of power are. And the main lever of power that can stop Israel, unfortunately, is only the US, because today the UN has lost a huge amount of its influence or ability to make things happen on the ground, and Israel doesn't care really about the UN that much, and it all became a matter of power and a matter of control, and the control and the power are in the hands of the US. Accordingly, I think we do have a very, very good relationship with the current administration in the US, and this is why President Sisi is managing to get through such messages, and I think these messages are very well received on the other end of the Atlantic at the White House.
And speaking about the messages sent by Foreign Minister Dr. Badr Abdulati was in the United States in Washington, D.C. to be attending the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank meetings, the spring meetings in Washington, D.C. He met alongside the meetings or the sidelines of the meeting with his counterpart from the U.S., the U.S. Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, speaking about the importance of mediation, of the mediation of Egypt and Pakistan and Saudi Arabia and Turkey and Qatar as well, in the current conflict between the United States and Iran, as well as the reconstruction of the Gaza Strip, the redevelopment of the Strip. How do you see the importance of those messages sent by Foreign Minister Badr Abdulati upon his visit to the U.S.?
We've talked very briefly about the recent meeting that took place in Turkey, in Antalya, and I think the U.S. would have, or the foreign minister would have aligned first on the great axis again, or the big axis of the negotiation or the mediation efforts of Egypt, because again, if that meeting in Antalya had taken place totally in isolation of the U.S., even if they, because they were not present there as far as the media says, or I know, maybe they wouldn't have been aligned. So a pre-alignment was necessary to make sure that whatever has been agreed or would be discussed in Antalya would be relevant and can be executed, because if it had been any sort of solutions could have been discussed or formulated in that meeting, unless the U.S. would have been pre-aligned on what is going to be proposed, more or less, would have been extremely difficult to make it happen on the ground. So I think he was playing a little bit of a shuttle diplomacy here, and that would have been the only way that we could achieve something out of the mediation efforts.
And speaking about the mediation efforts, Doctor, you mentioned throughout the episode one important statement by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi regarding the Gaza Strip, which is the forced displacement of the Palestinians from the Gaza Strip is a red line. It cannot be happening. It was rejected by Egypt and by Jordan, the Jordanian King Abdullah II, at the beginning of the conflict and at the beginning of the aggression, as you mentioned, on the 7th of October of 2023. How do you see the importance of the stance of Egypt very early on in the conflict?
It's really as important as the Palestinian cause, because if ever the solution of to the Palestinian cause is going to become move the Palestinians out, that's it. It's finished. This would be the end. So we had to draw this red line and make sure that the Palestinians have to stay in their land. It has nothing, or because actually when President Trump was pushing for this solution, he was talking about the size of Egypt, and you have free land in Sinai, and it has nothing to do with that or availability of place to accommodate them or not. This is totally beside the issue. The main issue is they have to stay in their land for them to take the land, because we know from history, whoever leaves his land, he never comes back.
Yes.
And if we allow them to go out, whether to Egypt or to anywhere else, because there were discussion on other countries, even Africa and things like this at that period of time, then the Palestinian cause would have ended here and there. So I think the stand that the Egyptian president took is actually maintained the Palestinian cause active and has given a chance for the Palestinians to stay in their land.
Yes, Dr. Ahmed Leithy, Nassef, the writer and the International Strategic Management Consultant, thank you very much for being with us tonight.
You're most welcome.
Anytime. And this brings us to the end of the daily debate for tonight. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.